All right, let's do the
Super
Eagles.
nuts.
Let's see how long that takes us.
The Eagles are definitely a little bit easier to break down too, just because we've seen it for 2 straight seasons and kind of know what to expect. So yeah, let's dive into this Eagles
Well,
team.
whenever we disagree about something, that always makes it the segment go like 7-8 minutes longer.
Yeah, of course.
All right, and the thing is, and not to go back to the Giants, I don't even disagree with you that Daniel Jones is going to be good this year and is a great steal at that price. I do. I like him a lot. When we did best ball together, we got him on at least 2 of the 3 teams we did together. It was great. So
yeah,
anyway,
exactly.
let's get into
You're
the
not
Eagles.
projecting a historic jump like that no other quarterback has ever made from one season to the next. I get that.
All right, let's go into the Eagles. Obviously, the Eagles, they were kind of is it fair to say they were the kind of best team in the NFC all year?
Yeah, very fair to say. Yeah. Absolutely.
Kind of just kept, and there was, buzz about the Giants, and then there was buzz about the 49ers and everything. The 49ers did have some extremely unfortunate breaks at the very end of the season when they finally met the Eagles in the playoffs. But I mean, the Eagles totally handled, all these like up and comers as the season went on. Obviously, the Rams disappeared and were nothing. And then, the Eagles gave an excellent showing of themselves in the Super Bowl. And, a couple things go differently, and they could have been the guys hoisting the Lombardi trophy. How do you feel about them this year?
I think they're going to be great again. I think that they're clear leader of this division, and I think we know pretty much what to expect, and I don't expect a whole ton to change. Team level wise, in the 2 seasons with Jalen Hurts, they've been at most 50% pass, so they love to run the ball, and why wouldn't you? Last year, I really think the blueprint they had last year, it's if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of thing. Bomb teams early. They do play with a real fast pace. They like to take those deep shots. Jalen Hurts was one of the best deep passers in the league last year. You certainly have great weapons to execute that. And then once you built that lead, you just suck your opponent dry. You run with that beastly offensive line, with Jalen Hurts, with whoever you have in the backfield, and you just bleed it out after you've built a huge lead in the second half. We saw that time and time again last year. And so I expect a very similar, right around 50-50, right around 50 or so more plays than average in terms of the big pies for the ground and the pass game there. And this one would be projecting Jalen Hurts to stay healthy. As I try to do with my projections, what would happen if he stayed healthy? He has missed 2 games in back-to-back seasons, but ultimately I would think this could be a season. If he does stay healthy, we could get a great one. So he's been around 30% rushing share in back-to-back years. I think it's very fair to keep him there, especially now with Miles Sanders gone. Maybe we see even a little bit more of an uptick in his rushing work. So starting there, that's the reason you love Jalen Hurts. At the quarterback position, he's getting you quality running back, 2 numbers, 794 yards, 10 touchdowns is what I project. He has done double-digit touchdowns in both of his professional seasons. He's been over 750 yards in both of his full professional seasons. So I don't think either of those is a big stretch, especially if they need to lean on him a little bit more with no Miles Sanders here now. The 4,500 passing yards, 31 TDs, that would be a big spike for him, and that would probably require that 2 games that he's missed in back-to-back seasons. He wouldn't be able to miss those games and hit over 4,000 yards this season. He also requires the division to be a little bit more competitive, and with the Giants picking things up, with the Commanders, a better overall offense, in my opinion, that's part of what I factored into the big passing game spike I projected. He's never been over 4,000 yards or 22 pass touchdowns. So both of those would be really big jumps for him. But I think with the way this division's shaking out, I do think that is very, very possible. They do have a great defense, though, that maybe can limit it. So that would be a big spike for him. But I just see these weapons as being so dangerous, especially in their second season, to really get it all together with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. So in terms of how that pie is getting distributed, right around what we saw last year, 24% for A.J. Brown, 23% for Devonta Smith. I see very similar 26-25% target shares, right around the volume. They saw a little bit of a boost there with more passing volume if they are playing tighter games in general. So 146 targets for A.J. Brown, 140 for Devonta Smith. And as you can see, right in line with what we saw last year, 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns. I think it's very reasonable to expect for A.J. Brown after he went for 11 touchdowns and right around 1,400 yards last year. I think it's more the same, maybe just a little bit more consistency and a little bit more, a higher catch rate I have him going for. So that way he has a few more receptions. I do think Devonta Smith, just like he did last year, could pace this team in receptions, but given that it'll be a lower yards per reception, he'll be under A.J. Brown's total and get to about 1,216 yards, 7 receiving touchdowns, right around what we saw last year, with a little bit more volume, a little bit of a bump in both of those for year 2 of the chemistry. Where I see a player taking a nice little step would be Dallas Goedert. He was playing great last year, but then missed a handful of games middle of the season. But he has historically averaged right around 17% to 18% target share. So that's where I slotted him at 18% target share, 101 targets, ultimately hauling in. Last year, he had over 80% catch rate. I don't think that sustains, but he's always been around 70 to 80, somewhere in that range. Very reliable underneath target, who's been running routes with the receivers in early practices, trying to really improve on his yak and just overall route skills. So maybe a slight bump in what we've seen career-wise for Dallas Goedert. Certainly possible with him. So 9, 12, and 6 on 76 catches. It's what I see for Dallas Goedert. Would put him definitely in that conversation for a top 5 tight end season. And then it's really not a whole lot passing game-wise. A couple deep bombs from Quez Watkins. Maybe Dan Arnold hauls in a backup tight end touchdown. But I don't see much else happening there for receivers or tight ends. I do think after last year, only 65 targets went to the running back position. That was a league low. I think now that they've traded for DeAndre Swift, he could definitely get a spike up. The running back position in general could get a spike up in targets. So I'll just show you real quick. I distributed that 9% going to Swift. That would cut into Kenny Gainwell, who saw 11 and then 8% target share in back-to-back years. I do see Swift eating into that workload. He's just a more explosive player, very dangerous with a ball in his hands. He's had 3 or more receiving touchdowns in all but 1 year so far in his career. So I think 3 is very, very reasonable for him. That's where I expect the majority of the running back receiving work. That's maybe part of the spike I see with Jalen Hurts, is just the ability for Swift to take a tiny little reception and rip it through the entire defense and suddenly be gone. So I expect that to happen a handful of times there, especially in the screen game too, with those beastly athletic linemen getting in front of him. Man, I could see some great work. That just leaves us with the running game at this point. That's one of the biggest question marks for this Eagles team. I right now have it projected, and it's such a tough one to project because DeAndre Swift, Rashaad Penny, they're both very talented. They're both very efficient, but they also both get hurt all the time. So how is it going to shake out? I have no clue. It's really, really tricky to project, but I will say this: Swift going around round 7 right now, and Penny going around round 9 to 10. I like, he's often sometimes even later, like 11. I've gotten Rashaad Penny. I like taking stabs on either of them. Particularly, I've gotten more Penny just because of the later price tag. But I mean, if I have Swift, that doesn't mean I'm not going to draft Penny just because I got one. I think both of them are going to get meaningful work. And behind the best offensive line in football, from whatever metric you want to look at, run blocking, pass blocking, PFF grades, they are an unbelievable stalwart unit that just opens up the biggest of holes for these guys. We saw Miles Sanders rush for 11 touchdowns last year. So I think this backfield combined, if you take out Jalen Hurts, the running backs all combined for over 15 touchdowns. I think that could definitely be in play with 14 right now touchdowns total going to Swift, Penny, and Gainwell. I think the leading rusher will be Penny. He's just a pure burner. We saw just 2 seasons ago, weeks 14 through 17, this guy was the best running back in fantasy for your fantasy playoffs. He's been a hyper efficient guy throughout his career. This might seem insane to project him for 6.1 yards a carry, but he's been above 6.3 in back-to-back seasons behind a worse offensive line with Seattle inside a worse overall offense where they can stack the box more on him. He's still been an absolute monster, largely because the huge plays. This guy has some of the best highlight runs of the last couple of years. It's just a matter of health for him. But if he stays healthy and can get to 150 to 200 carries behind this line, I think 1,000 yards is definitely within Penny's reach. In addition to, I have him for 6 touchdowns. And again, trying to be a little conservative. And I still think, that number could easily be hit by Penny. So I really love him at his price. I don't think there's a lot of receiving meat on the bone for him when you got Swift and Gainwell also in the background. So it's really just going to be an early down role for him. But I think behind this line, that might be all you need for some really, really big spike weeks. Just hope you get them at the right time. But man, Swift stays healthy. He has the upside to go for 5.0 or so a pop, running about 5 or 6 touchdowns. He's always been a good touchdown scorer. He was 3rd in the league last year in fantasy points per opportunity. He just got dinged up, wasn't healthy all year. And that's always been the rub with Swift, is he struggles to play through injuries and be himself. And we'll see. I think this offense is definitely more dangerous, though, where he doesn't have to be a centerpiece. He can be more of a complementary piece. And in that role, he could really thrive and open up the efficiency quite a bit. So 745 on the ground with 5 through the 5 touchdowns, and then about 300 yards. I could see him being about a 1,000 total yards and 8 to 10 touchdowns. That would be a really good season for Swift at his price tag. And you can't discount Gainwell. I know I haven't projected for the least here, but a lot of people saying as the incumbent, he might lead this team in total touches. Plus, he's got two very injury-prone guys ahead of him. So I definitely think you're going to get some solid Kenny Gainwell weeks, whether it's because of injury, whether he just stays solid. He's been very efficient throughout his young career. So all three of these backs, Gainwell going by far the last round dart throw, Penny going around 10 through 12, and then Swift 7 to 8 range. I like the price tags on all of them. I projected them all pretty favorably, even in a shared committee, even with Jalen Hurts eating into all of it. I think all three of those guys can have solid seasons and warrant their price tags.
Yeah, I look at the Eagles as the Giants, but better. I feel like quarterback similar. Obviously, Hurts way more explosive, stuff like that. But if you look at their numbers and stuff and touchdown to interception ratio, they're not that dissimilar. I just look at the weapons that Hurts has, and they're just better, except Saquon. I would say. I mean, Goddard and Waller, maybe that's a push. But man, you asked me like, who do you think is going to fall flat on that Giants receiving core? And I'm just like, it could be any of them. But man, yeah. AJ Brown and Devonta Smith are just both the real deal. They really are, yes. And that's a huge difference. I did want to point out, you gave that stat on Jones, said he was the only 700-yard rusher with less than 10 picks. Jalen Hurts had 760 yards rushing and only 6 picks last year, so he's actually also in that club and pretty comparable. Very good touchdown to interception ratio for both of those guys. Both very careful with the football, and of course, the 13 rushing touchdowns for Hurts last year really kept me in my fantasy league longer than I deserved to be there. So, I love the Eagles. They're fun to watch. Love Hurts. Got him on the cheap last year. Don't think that's going to be happening again, unfortunately. Yeah, I think I got
no way he'll be going cheap. It is just so crazy. I think he led all quarterbacks last year in points per game, and that was with throwing under 4K yards, he hit 22 passing touchdowns. So if we get this spike, which it doesn't seem that unreasonable if you get the health from Goedert and Hurts in the second year with those two beastly receivers, plus Swift adds a whole new receiving element. At 4,500 might be a big stretch, but I just struggled because I looked at it as like, nope, I think AJ Brown nails that. I think Devonta Smith nails that. I think 300 yards for Swift seems very reasonable. 900 for Goddard seems real. And I was like, where do I take it away? Because I don't want, this doesn't seem right, 4,500 yards for him, but then I don't know. All these things seem fairly reasonable as well. Maybe it's just Quez Watkins only getting to 100 yards because he's just a nobody. And the de facto, those kind of ancillary pieces just not doing as much as these projections show them doing. But I don't think any of those big names are, I think they all do exactly what I projected them for because it's very similar to what they've already been doing their entire careers.
Love AJ Brown as a player. Where is he going in drafts right now relative to Devonta Smith?
So, both those guys are – so he goes round 1. A.J. Brown in underdog drafts, given that the receivers go very heavy. He goes top 8. He goes around 8, 9. I don't have a ton of him just because I
don't love him there. I don't love him at 8, 9. I mean, it seems a little
I don't really either. Devonta Smith does go late too. The thing is, as much as I do like these guys and I've statted them out, I bet you I'll get them more in redraft leagues where Brown's probably going to fall to early to mid round 2, and Devonta Smith might be a late 2, early 3rd turn. That's where I really would like to buy these guys. But right now, Brown is going at the same price tag as Austin Eckler. I'm going to take Austin Eckler there. You saw yesterday, having for 17 touchdowns and almost 2,000 yards, just like he's done in back-to-back years. So I'm going to keep riding that out. Smith goes kind of around Derrick Henry. That's tough for me to justify as well, even though I know Henry's on the cliff. In approaching it, I can't necessarily pull that trigger over him. But still, that's not a fault to them. I like the players going around him just a little bit more. But I do still really, really like these guys.
Yeah, that's fair. Like you said, I'm not taking him over Austin Eckler. I don't think I'm taking Devonta Smith over Derrick Henry. But I love these guys as players.
What do you think about Smith versus T. Higgins? If you were going to go a receiver there, which of those number 2 but number 1 fantasy receivers guys are you more interested in?
I'm probably more interested in Higgins, although it's a good question. And it might be because I've been a Higgins owner that was served well by him in the past. How that goes. You know what I
Nothing
mean?
wrong with that. Like when you're picking hairs, it's so tough to decide which one of these guys I like more. I personally prefer Smith, but it's really about who's done it for you before. Like that's a totally valid justification if it's as close as those two are. And in projections wise, they're very close for me. I think Hagen's a few more touchdowns and a little bit less yards and less catches. Very, very similar ultimate stats for the guys, though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always going to lean a little bit towards Derrick Henry because I had him the year when he was just like, well, not the year, but a year when he was
Which year, true? He's been an absolute tank for many.
He was like owning a tank. He really was. It was just like I remember. It was the year when it was just like not unrealistic for him to just like get a handoff at the 2 and just take it 98 yards.
Yes.
That was when I was living my best life.
That's still more. I mean, he does that. He's been doing it last year, even at times. So, yeah, that's it. And you think about the locker room presence too. Like when you get off the bus and your opponent, your fantasy opponent, sees Derrick Henry versus Devonta Smith. No insult to Devonta Smith, but you're talking about a 5'11", 185-pound guy versus like 6'2", 250, and ridiculous measurables and speed. Like it's just one guy definitely strikes a little more fear into your opponents.
You're not like stressing about how am I going to keep tackling Devonta Smith in the fourth quarter.
Right, exactly. Not bludgeoning your defense to death, right? What is up, you fantasy wolf? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, share your thoughts in the comments, check out some more videos, and join the newest Wolfpack by subscribing below.